The Wes Penra Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The Second Level of Learning. http://wespenry.com. Part 1, Metaphysics and Exopolitics. Metaphysics Paper Number 1, The Feminine Universe. By Wes Penra, Wednesday, May 2, 2012. Revised, Friday, July 13, 2012. http://wespenry.com. Part 2. 5. A balance between female and male energies. It's easily done when we see how women have been treated over time, to turn everything around and create an extreme on the other end. We certainly don't want to build a mother goddess cult, where we fight over the love of the goddess. This universe has had enough of that, so it's nothing we want to enhance. Building a matriarchal regime to substitute the patriarchal one is not the answer. We are going to talk a lot about the Aryan Empire in these papers, because it has had such an enormous influence on humanity from our cradle up to adolescence, which is where we are now. The extraterrestrial societies of Orion are in honor of the Mother Goddess, and have known for a long time that the universe is feminine in nature. Their opponents is the patriarchal regime, which is led by the lords from Sirius, and unfortunately, we humans here on Earth have been caught in the middle of this ancient struggle between matriarchs and patriarchs. These papers are meant to, and hopefully will, shed some light on this issue and present some suggestions to resolve it, perhaps once and for all. It may sound very ambitious, but maybe the solution is simpler than we think, if we all work together. The Aryan Empire is a matriarchal society, where everything centers on a queen, who is said to be the multidimensional representative of the Mother Goddess, but it is not a matriarchal regime from how I have had it described, because it does not exclude the male from the picture. It is clearly understood by all races who subscribe to the religion of the Aryan Empire that the universe is feminine and that males and females work together to achieve their goals to assist the goddess in her creation. Males and females live in harmony and just have different roles. However, there have been a few races who have not succeeded in understanding the synthesis, which is the natural result between the thesis and the antithesis of female and male, and jealousy amongst the males have been prominent and led to conflicts also in Orion at times. Orion, I've been told by an anonymous source, is more like a beehive community, where everyone is learning their place in life, and each person is supported by the rest to develop the skills and the passions that a person wishes to enhance in order to contribute to the overall society. Because the Orions are so closely connected to Mother Goddess, there are very rarely any conflicts within the empire. This kind of society infrastructure reminds me of what I have called humane meritocracy, which is based on finding out early where a child's talents are and develop them. In a nutshell, there is of course much more to it. This is done when the child is old enough to communicate their passions. These passions should be taken seriously, and if the child so wishes, society will back him or her up and help the child achieve their goals. This way we have children who grow up in a society where they have found their place and can contribute with something that fascinates them. They can work in the field where their passion lies, and we will see a society of happy and healthy beings who are excited to go to work in the morning, because it satisfies the needs of the individual and at the same time contributes to society as a whole. But to achieve a goal like this, a society needs to be spiritually evolved, enough to be able to accomplish it. In the beginning, the universe seems to have been entirely feminine. The male energies were created afterwards, when Mother Goddess decided that some races, but not all, should start reproducing by sexual means instead of pure genetic engineering and cloning. Sexuality also let the beings connect with Mother Goddess in a very intimate way, which is not impossible, but harder to achieve otherwise. Sexuality is just another way of Mother Goddess to experience herself in the universe she created. Another important thing I believe is to let men be men and women be women. Still, I think that even though we were born with a certain gender, it's important that we develop both the masculine and feminine inside ourselves to create a balance. I think it was basically this balance that was lacking in the old male gods, who took women as sex slaves. If men let more of their feminine side come to surface and acknowledge it while still being men and masculine, and women bring forth more of their masculine side while still being women and feminine, we create the balance needed for both genders to experience the mother goddess energies together, and there would be a better understanding between the genders. It's my true belief that accomplishing this is part of the initiation into higher consciousness. When working with the goddess energy, we need to deeply explore the feminine principle. This goes for both genders. If we ask a woman in today's world to start expressing the powerful fire of her female energy, she almost certainly wouldn't know how to do this. The trick is to go inside. Women must ask themselves what the feelings are that she has inside that she is not expressing. What can she do to become more of a goddess in a female body? The answers are inside. The goddess inside is the one who knows. This is nothing she can read in a book, it has to be felt and experienced, but it's there. The Pleiadians say in Marciniak's book Earth, Pleiadian Keys to the Living Library, that there will be more female teachers and leaders in the near future, because the goddess embodies in her kind. Still, they are quick to add that the goddess also works with male energies, for men will also learn how to embody the goddess. The goddess is not discriminating, and in her there is no anger, she's a very allowing entity, they say. Interestingly, this is also exactly what Robert Morning Sky is emphasizing in his audio lectures on his main website. 6. How Mother Goddess was suppressed in ancient times and replaced with a Father God. In the translation of the Sumerian clay tablets, we stumble upon the Anunnaki deity called Enlil, or the Enlil, as it is actually a title, who is one of a composite of beings who presented themselves in the Bible as Jehovah, Yehovah, or Yhvh, Yahweh, the God of the Jews. Here is a clear example how ETS, showing themselves off as gods, turn the true God source into a patriarchal deity of flesh and blood. Yhvh in its ultimate term, however, is the true creator, the all that is, the mother goddess whom the leaders of the ET patriarchal movement reversed from being a feminine deity to becoming a masculine. I will generally not, however, use the term Yhvh when I talk about Mother Goddess, because it's already so confused with the Yhvh presented in the Old Testament and elsewhere. Anton Parks has spent a lot of time tracing the concepts of Mother Goddess and male deities in human literature. Here is a quote from his Le Secret, note number 22, pages 118 to 119. In diverse passages of the Judaic literature but also of the Bible and other traditions of the planet, the original primordial and androgyne source has been subtly replaced by a masculine divinity named God or the Father. It is clearly seen that at the epoch when the scripture made its appearance on earth and the cosmogony of the biblical texts was drafted, in fact, several thousand years later, after 1000 BC, the religion of the Mother Goddess was losing ground. In reality it has not ceased to regress over the course of time. The growing acceptance of the male religions by numerous patriarchal societies rapidly accelerated the extinction of the feminine creator divinity. Under these conditions, the monotheistic drafters could not attribute the full original creation to any entity other than God himself, a masculine entity, while they clearly knew that the first creation was rather the work of plural entities, the Elohim, at the service of a mother goddess, a jointly conceived master plan for the earth. Everything pertaining to this ancient mother goddess divinity was grossly deformed, demonized, or radically suppressed. The patriarchal doctrine that consisted in marking the domination of God over an ancient feminine divinity, totally submitted to its orders, therefore took over. In the mythology of India, the divine and primordial energy is called Shakti, which transposed into Sumerian gives A6AKTI, literally the good miracle worker of life. Shakti is no other than the representation of the Divine Mother, the Mother Goddess, more precisely the personification of the feminine principle that Hinduism very correctly associates with the Holy Spirit. This obliges us to examine the Hebrew Ruach Elohim, which means Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit. The Mother Goddess, skillfully demonized by the dominant patriarchy of the Judaic religion, is concealed in the demoness Lilith. Some associate Lilith with the Hebrew Layla night. Others think that Lilith comes from the Sumerian term Lil-Ti, generally translated as spirit of life, but I would rather interpret it, in our context, as she who gives the breath of life, in the sense of the entity who breathed life into the primordial man. Judaic imagery represents Lilith as a night bird, a symbol taken directly from one of the most ancient attributes of the Mother Goddess, that is to say the bird or the dove that the Christians used to symbolize the Holy Spirit. This volatile aspect of Mother Goddess is also found in Greek mythology, where Eurynome, the universal and primordial goddess, changes into a dove while pondering the universal egg from which all things come. An amusing note, if one translates the name of the primordial goddess from Greek into Sumerian, one gets Aaron 2 No and Sumerian bands of midwives, or old or even ancient women, or again Aaron 2 Me, bands of midwives of divine order. The same idea is found in the Egyptian traditions, throughout the pyramid texts, which relate that the supreme and androgynous divinity Adam, from his Egyptian name Itmu, metamorphoses into the bird Ben to create the air, the earth, and the sky, or heaven. Thanks again to Emia, the matrix language of the priestesses that incorporates the Sumero-Assyro-Babylonian particles, we are going to obtain some confirmations and to clarify this a bit more. First, we translate the name of this divinity into Itmu, the meteorological force, which clearly attests to its creative function cited above, creation of the air, the earth, and the sky. Next, its Greek name Adam, which gives Adam the old father-woman, confirming the androgyny of Adam or at least the fact that this entity symbolizes different creative forces at the service of the same cause. And finally, the term Ben that is attributed to this bird phoenix creator and that gives Bien, the Lord who speaks. Numerous traditions assimilate the word to the creation of the world. This is exactly what happened. The Anunnaki took the female terms and names from the Aryan language, which eventually became the Sumerian language, and others, demonized them, and or turned them into masculine to suppress the power of the divine feminine. In an interview called Emerging Feminine, the famous researcher Michael Tsarian brings up that anthropologists know that the females were the keepers of the wisdom. One of our tasks right now, he says, is to bring the Holy Grail back to its femininity 6, something that has been almost totally lost over time. Don't think for a moment that Marduk and his son, who are still controlling us behind the scenes, don't understand the power of the feminine. They are very scared that we humans are going to regain this power by seeing through the lies. They are terrified that we start listening to our women, once they have regained their psychic abilities and their ancient wisdom, something that is happening all over the world as we speak. I believe we incarnate both as females and males, respectively, in order to have both experiences. When being males, one of our jobs is to bring out the feminine part of ourselves and balance it with our masculine part, but also to support and protect the females so they can keep their connection with Source intact, in order to accumulate creative goddess energies. So, the feminine power really is embedded in the female body, boosted by the soul's connection with the divine feminine. In the Orion Empire, the males have to present themselves as females before the queen's court to concur with the vibrations of the divine feminine. This doesn't necessarily mean that they dress in skirts, but that they bring in their feminine energies to the court to be able to successfully match the energies of the Mother Goddess. In its extreme, to prevent the divine feminine from coming to the surface, especially in women, they produce TV shows where young women fight each other, just like men are doing, punching each other with their fists and beating each other up pretty badly, exaggerating their male energies, just like it was done in the 60s to 70s, but now in a new and much more violent fashion. Many people can't wait until the evening comes when they can sit down after work, screaming and cheering their way through these shows. Like Tsarian says in the same interview, the global elite knows exactly what is about to occur. Mankind is starting to be aware of the divine feminine, slowly but surely, and they can't let that happen. Still, it is a slow transition in the beginning. We have been manipulated for so long to believe that God is a male, that we can't switch views with a handshake. If we want to make sure we succeed, we need to be balanced, and find a partner who is balanced, or that both are working on becoming so. An important part of experiencing this balance and regain the feminine power within ourselves is through our sexuality. This doesn't mean we should be promiscuous. It is more important than ever to find the real soul connection between the man and the woman to reach the maximum effect. 7. Elohim as feminine life designers. How interesting, isn't it then, when we see Anton Parks claim that the Elohim were female life designers, and that Elohim is a female word to begin with, having Aryan origins. A large majority of the myths and legends about ancient Earth talk about female visitors from elsewhere, and we don't need to go further than to our own Bible. In Genesis 1:26, the word Elohim, meaning feminine gods in plural, is usually translated as God. The term Elohim is divided in Sumerian/Akkadian as El-Uhaim, the powerful Hai that mixed the clay, or clay equals man. These Elohim form an association of ethnic and cultural planners who work directly with and for Source, the highest of all. This Source contains a female energy, that of Mother Goddess. These female beings are in conflict with the male authority of the Sumerian texts, the so-called Anunnaki in Zechariah Sitchin's Epos, the Earth Chronicles. The female life designers belonged to a group of beings Parks call Katatu Def, a word I've learned is Aryan/Orion in its origins. The root word is the Aryan word khaa.dh.i.ss.t.u, where khaa is pertaining to the life force or the void, dh is denoting Genesis, I means at the side of, ss, or, is causative. T when it stands alone emphasizes the feminine, and u is plural. The interesting thing with this interpretation is that I translated it myself into the Aryan language after an anonymous source taught me the basic structure and grammar of the Aryan language. The rest was quite easy. I showed my translation to this person, who approved. So Katatu is Aryan and means something similar to life force in the beginning of time, standing at the side of the causative female, and they are more than one in numbers. In both Sumerian, Akkadian as well as the Aryan language, from which the first two stem, one long word like khaa.dh.i.ss.t.u. consists are 6 words if you count them, khaa and dh and I and ss and t and u, all meaning something different, but when connected with each other via dots, or hyphens, respectively, they build a concept and is a compromised way of presenting an alien language in the human, Latin alphabet. This word, Katatu, is evidence which tells us that there is a female life force in the universe, because that's what the word means. As we shall see, the absolute majority of the Katatu are females, but there are a few exceptions. Not only does the word go back to Sumerian times, but is clearly Aryan in origin, or I wouldn't have been able to translate it. The translation fits perfect with what the Sumerian/Akkadian word stands for. The causative female, SST, is Mother Goddess herself. 8. The war on females in Earth history. Even after the ultimate political religious patriarchs got their stronghold here on Earth, Mother Goddess cults were still present, but were often secretive and in hiding. The patriarchal movement was terrified of them. In fact, these groups, practicing the feminine religion from the stars, could easily break their control over mankind if the truth became known. We know from history that the powerful Catholic Church, for example, saw women as something they could beat, torture, rape and enslave. Also, it was promoted that a woman had no soul. If this is not a sign of the Church being terrified of the divine feminine, I don't know what is. Today, the witch hunt on women has decreased drastically, but women are still often classified as second-hand citizens, and in the Arab countries the Muslim women must wear a veil, as we all know, and is the man's property. These countries never got out of, and are still stuck in, the horror of the Dark Ages, and in these countries, very little has changed over the centuries. In 1484, Pope Innocent VIII, what a name of a tyrant, decided that the Inquisition should start hunting down the old matriarchal religion. The publication in 1486, the Malleus Maleficarum, the Witch's Hammer, a work of the Dominicaans Heinrich Kramer and Johann Sprenger, laid the ground for the tyranny which spread through Europe and North America, and lasted for more than 2 centuries. An estimate of 9 million heretics, 80% of them women, children, or young girls, whom the Church thought had inherited the evil of their mothers, were murdered. In the medieval Catholic Church, women and their sexuality was evil incarnated. 8.1. Definition of witch. Because of the Catholic Church and their genocide of women, we often think of the word witch as something negative and evil. But how about if we break down this word as well to see where it comes from? Anton Parks was actually doing this in an interview with Karmapolis. In the Sumerian language, the root to the word witch is, according to Parks, Muziu. The simple decomposition of Miusziu gives us the woman with the secretion wisdom or the woman venom knowledge. The Sumerian homophony game will still give us some additional details without distorting the original meaning of the term. If we switch us and mi, we obtain, Usmiziu or wise women in blood, or the woman who raises the knowledge, or wisdom. 9. Again, the patriarchal movement doesn't want us to know about the divine feminine, so they are killing all movements which are trying to put the record straight. Of course, not every witch knows the whole story about the divine feminine, but the global elite takes no chances. 9. Cosmogony from a new point of view. According to many evolved star races out there, allegedly, the universe is not neuter. For energy to be aware, it has to be conscious, and for it to be conscious, it would have to be able to identify with things, e.g. feelings, male and female. Neuter cannot experience this as it is nothing, much like a person whose nervous system feels nothing, they are in a vegetative state and are deemed mentally dead. The goddess is the ultimate creator, at least as far as it is known by older, more evolved beings in the multiverse. She is the void which quantum physicists like LPGC are talking about is surrounding the perceived egg-shaped unum, or multiverse. But the unum as depicted in a 2D form is only a model, of course, and in reality the 96% void is all intertwined, it is among us and around us, and within us. It's the black space that scientists can't explain, because they don't know what it is and what it does. So it is also very much predominant in 4 space/time, and in time/space, which is the ether. Hence, it's very interesting when we hear from scientists that they are supposedly starting to understand how the universe works. I would say that they are still in kindergarten at best, at least when comes to the knowledge they release to the public. Behind the scenes, they know so much more. But remember, they too are working for the patriarchal regime. The first thing we need to understand is that the Khaa, or the void, is intelligent energy. It is the essence of the mother goddess, and therefore feminine. Those who say they have experienced the Khaa and explain it as being a nothingness, but a nothingness of bliss, without thought, emotions, or any other of the senses we normally are used to, it is just because of that we are not used to this kind of energy. All people I've heard of, whom have been there, also say it is a place of pure love, unconditional love. And for it to be that, it can't be a nothingness, or neuter, or it would be totally void of any emotions or sensations. The real problem is that we humans, with our limited perceptions, can't understand the raw goddess energy, and the above is the best way those who have experienced it can describe it. However, the energy is still feminine. If we don't understand the 96% of the universe, and can't even claim to know the 4%, how much do we really understand of reality? And some people say there are no ETS from other dimensions? How can they be so sure, when we, who live in the 4%, are actually the ones in minority? Think about it. Scientists also say we use only up to 10% of our brain capacity. ETS understand this, and like David Icke says, dark is only dark because humanity and its technology can't tune into it and make it manifest in its reality. The Pleiadians expands on this thought by saying, your planet must learn who the goddess is as a creator. You must. Understanding the dark side of the goddess is part of exploring her energy, because the goddess did something to lose her power. It is in the cells of your being because all of you, man and woman alike, have the goddess within you. The goddess is going to be birthed through you, whether you are male or female. There was a decline and fall of the goddess for very important reasons. What those reasons were will be clearly explained later on in these papers. In the Aryan cosmogony, the feminine omniverse, which is alive and whom they call the goddess, once upon a time created the physical universes as a way to express herself throughout the dimensions. She appointed the builders deaf, creator gods, who then, in service of the Mother, went out and created galaxies, stars, planets, and seeded life on them. But the life force in this universe sprung from the galactic centers, and by rotating in a spiral pattern, life extends outwards towards the fringes. Hence, the oldest stars, in general, should be found in the outskirts of the galaxy, one would think, but this is not always the case. Stars are popping up everywhere, because they are evolving creator gods themselves, ready to let others seed life on their own heavenly bodies. Their main star system, or headquarters of sorts for the Orion Empire, is said to be the star system Mintaka in the constellation of Orion, some 900 light-years from Earth. The history of the Orion Empire could probably fill up volumes of books, as I always can sense a story behind a story when I research star races. It appears that Orion in present time is an overall rather peaceful empire, but there are indications that it hasn't always been that way. They, too, have of course gone through stages of evolution, where conquest was a big part of it. According to most research here on Earth, the Aryans spent millions of years conquering space and were involved in a number of galactic wars before they became more spiritually oriented and evolved into an empire with peaceful laws and policies. They also became master geneticists. After billions of years of seeding the universe, the Aryans had a vast majority of inhabited star systems in the Milky Way and other galaxies joining Orion, and the Queen's Empire became known as the Orion Empire, or the Ary.an Empire, where Ari or Ma.Ari, Mary, means mother, Anan means extension of something, or Orion, the heavenly empire in Aryan language, hence we have Aryan meaning extension of mother or Aryan Empire. This is where the names Mary and Mary-Ann come from, the latter also meaning extension of the mother. The English language has a lot of Aryan origins to it. Over time, the Orion Empire grew to an incomprehensibly vast empire, spanning across the universe and even extending into other universes. This is why it is so hard when we talk about different star races here on Earth and where they come from. If someone says a star race comes from Lyra, we may still be talking about the Orion Empire, because at least part of the Lyra constellation is part of the Empire, so it can be pretty confusing if we are not aware of how vast it is. I will go into this some more as we move on. The Aryans, and most evolved alien races, are not third-dimensional beings like we are, but multidimensional and interdimensional in nature. These are specially designated souls, so they don't change because one of their bodies would be killed or die in one way or the other. We can perhaps compare it to the Dalai Lama. When he dies, they look for a new Dalai Lama, who has a new, younger body, but is still supposedly a reincarnation of an earlier Dalai Lama. Furthermore, the Aryans talk about the fire, which is another word for soul. In Orion they look at souls as fires. The origin or this fire stems then, naturally, from the mother goddess, the 96% dark energy/matter, and is thus feminine in nature. Sexes came into the picture much later. It is my understanding that sex as a way of reproducing is, if not rare, not the most common way to reproduce in the universe, hence so many non-physical star races want to come down here to have sex. In the beginning, star races were cloning and/or used genetic engineering to create more of their own species. This may sound odd to us, but is quite a convenient way to create new vessels for the souls when the old ones in one way or the other is beyond repair. Interdimensional ETs don't die in the sense we do, there is no death. So, if these entities could reproduce through sex, their species would pretty soon be overpopulated. However, this has happened, as George Lobuono describes in his fascinating book, Alien Mind, which can be downloaded for free in Word and PDF, with the author's consent. 10. The Cosmic Orgasm. Barbara Marciniak's Pleiadians, from here on called the Pleiadians, plain and simple, to distinguish from Barbara Hand-Klau's Pleiadians, whom I from now on will call Pleiadians B, are often talking about the divine feminine and mother goddess in their books and lectures, and here is an example and another excerpt from Marciniak's excellent book, Earth, the Pleiadian Keys to the Living Library. The pain of the Pleiadian experiment has to do with finding a way to appease the mother goddess, because it is the mother goddess with whom we are all connected. The Pleiadians also talk about the galactic center being the womb of the mother, of course referring to the female womb and genitals, therefore referring to the galaxy, as the rest of the universe, to be feminine in nature. This is a pretty interesting concept if we take it to another level. What do we see? Well, if we follow the Pleiadian concept, we have the womb of the mother in the middle, the galactic center with millions of stars clustered close together so it looks like one single supergiant star when in fact there are many. Then, in the middle, impossible to see in this picture, is a giant black hole. It sure looks like a great cosmic orgasm, and in a way we might say that it is, when nebulae and stars shoot out from the womb of the mother in the center. But if the mother gave birth to a galaxy by being impregnated, it has to be done with a male energy involved, one would think. This is not impossible either, as the goddess created both genders and thus can be both. However, the nebulae and stars, and even the galaxy itself as a whole, is pure feminine energy. So it's more likely that the galaxies were created in a different way, but how? It's done by sound. The universe is made up by sound, another thing we will detail more in the next paper. If you could expand yourself so you can see the whole universe from above, you would be able to hear the symphonies of the galaxies, something I was teaching people from the time I was 14 years old and which I now get confirmed by my research. Now, take a look at the galaxy again. Imagine that you can shrink this particular galaxy to a size where it fits on a big table, which represents the universe, or the part of the universe close to the galaxy. Pretend that the stars and clusters you see are grains of salt, but not yet spiral-like, but everything is just a round sphere. Then apply certain sound frequencies to the table. What would happen? If all grains of salt were gathered in a huge galactic center, eventually by applying particular sound frequencies, you would get a similar spiral pattern like the one you have in figure 9. In the picture you can almost see that if you applied more sound to it, it would scatter and move even more. This is how it is done. Each galaxy looks different from its neighbor, and that is because they vibrate on different sound frequencies. This is an exciting revelation, because we also know that dimensions and densities vibrate on different frequencies. Does this mean that each galaxy, if they all vibrate slightly different, are starting their evolution of life in slightly different densities so the universe can let the mother goddess experience more? It is most certainly so. 11. Inanna, the female rebel. In Sitchin's work, Inanna is portrayed as a female warrior, who had an engulfing appetite for men and sex. She slept with anyone she could find who had a phallus, figuratively speaking, and even opened up a whorehouse, which she ran and participated in. To put it mildly, Sitchin did not put Inanna in a positive light. He even claimed that she killed her lovers after they had satisfied her, and she was a merciless war goddess, whose main attention was on power and sex. This is probably where the myth of the Black Widow is originally coming from. Black Widow, for those who don't know, is also a spider who eats her male after she is impregnated. Anton Parks, on the other hand, tell another story than that of Sitchin's. Parks claims that Sitchin has misinterpreted the Sumerian texts, and that Inanna in fact supported the cult of the mother goddess, as he calls it, and was therefore a rebel and hated by the patriarchal controllers of the earth at the time. Her courage to openly practice the religion of the divine feminine brought her singular reprisals from the gods in the Mesopotamian texts, and also from the adepts of Yahweh of the Bible, who is a composite of many gods, mostly the Anunnaki Lord, Namur, the Enlil, and King Anu. Uruk, which was the town designated to Inanna, was, according to Parks and his English translator, Gary Zeitlin, the city of prostitutes and daughters of joy. Now, if we look up the word prostitution, we find that it is Latin and means, to put up front for sale, or to place forward, and was originally not referring to someone who charged for sex to feed sex-hungry men. On the contrary, Parks and Zeitlin are stating that here is where women were instructed in the initiation of men into sacred sexuality. So she was not opening a whorehouse in our sense of the word, but a place where men and women could learn about sacred sex, opposed to having sex just to ejaculate and leave the woman unsatisfied, especially when women are, as most of us know, multi-orgasmic. The male gods who were here on earth in ancient times usually had sex for the purpose of domination and control, and to extend their power and bloodlines, failing, as we've discussed earlier, to fully understand the female orgasm and real sex magic. However, they did know that the females carry the secrets of the universe within, but they didn't understand what it is or how to get it, although they certainly went way and beyond to try to get it. Inanna and her team apparently taught men they thought were ready to learn, or relearn rather, how sacred sex works. I can only imagine how this must have infuriated the Anunnaki power elite. The story doesn't tell what the Anunnaki did to the males who were initiated in these rituals, though. Were they tortured to reveal the secrets, or what happened? For those interested in this subject, here is something to further research. Later on I will explain to the reader that the term Anunnaki is misleading in another of Sitchin's mistranslations, but until I get to that point, I will use the term Anunnaki for the negative ETS from Sirius and the planet A.am.e, whom I discussed in level I. Another thing to mention here is that Inanna is simply a title that can be used by anybody, and is normally not designated to a person. It stems from Aya.Na, again meaning an extension of the mother. However, this doesn't mean a person couldn't take on that title and use it as her name. We do similar things here on Earth. 12. The great suppressed powers of the feminine. Our bodies are comprised of billions of tiny little fires, electrical particles called molecules and atoms, the expert learned men tell us. This quote is taken from Robert Morningsky's opening paragraph of his 2008 Eridob papers, which are no longer online. The thing is that every second of our existence, our nerve endings send about 100 million signals to our body and our brains. Still, studies have showed that on our best day, we utilize only 40 of these signals. That is what we call our awareness. This really puts things a little bit more in perspective. We are talking about the human body here, which while we are on Earth is our nerve center, the vessel which helps us perceive the universe from a 3D perspective. However, no one in human form can today even begin to understand the capacities that our biological bodies have. They are highly multidimensional and have the potentials to send and receive on all levels of the multidimensional cosmos. It's like a hypersensitive antenna. In level I we were talking about how parts of our DNA, which our bodies in their original form had in a functional state to be able to stay multidimensional, were cut off, basically by limiting the frequency range of which we can perceive reality, resulting in us being disconnected from the majority of the multiverse. This is what I see between the lines in Morningsky's statement. All the great majority of signals are just passing us by and we don't even notice them. Now, when we are becoming more aware, we are picking up more of these signals as our junk DNA is being reactivated. Barbara Marciniak is also mentioning something very similar in her excellent book, Bringers of the Dawn. 13. The Rites of Sacred Ecstasy. Robert Morningsky, like many ancient native tribes, equate the soul with fire, the fire within, which is a gift from the Creator, that makes the goddess dimensions accessible to the beings of different realities. Way back in time, says Morningsky, there were those who practiced rites of sacred ecstasy of the goddess, when people lived much closer to earth and nature around them. This made them much more psychic and multidimensional, and they understood the power of the divine feminine. These rites still exist in somewhat watered-down versions amongst the native peoples around the world, but even there a lot of knowledge has been lost over time. Today's rites, closest to the original ones, can be found in Siberian shamanism. Robert goes on, talking about shamanism, the ways of magic and sorcery, and how they were the ways and rites of sacred ecstasy. These were not rites of sex, he points out, but rites of fire. In those rituals, a woman in the throes of ecstasy could leave the real world, the 4%, and connect with the other world, the 96% of all that is, which is otherwise not accessible to humans to any significant degree. For a moment, those women could be truly omnidimensional. With practice, women could then surrender to embrace this ecstasy and delve deeper and deeper into the other world. Thus, once they mastered their ecstatic experiences, they could get closer and closer to the ultimate divine, the mother goddess. Unfortunately, these old secrets, in their essence, are lost to mankind. Once the patriarchal regime took over, after the ET invader forces rose into power, men also rose to become commanders of the rites. Men, however, did not, and do still not understand and know the hidden language of ecstasy, as Robert calls it. These men assigned their own values to something they did not know, and soon the divine feminine had been transformed to the divine masculine. The rites that previously allowed humans who participated in them, women and men, to tune into the goddess universe now instead kept mankind trapped in the real world. Ecstasy became forbidden, and denial and suppression of fire was now the key to the otherworld paradise, claimed the men of power. To further emphasize their correctness in this, they claimed having direct contact with the divine. After years of research and numerous travels within the USA and other countries, visiting natives and participating in, and learning about, their rituals and religions, Morning Sky came to the conclusion that the universe is certainly feminine in nature and God actually should not be Father God but Mother Goddess. Nor is the universe or the divine neuter, but feminine in its essence. He found out that the earliest practices of shamanism were based on increasing the bioelectricity of the human body. There are different ways to achieve this increase, but the easiest way is to take advantage of the natural powers that women have, and this is what the ancients did. Later on, these women were called high priestesses. When a woman who could access these powers from within exploited them, she generated an enormous amount of electrical energy which if it could be absorbed could be used in the outside world. She became like a lightning rod, attracting the natural energies of the earth, and a generator that focused these energies into a usable force. In level I talked about that the human DNA is a part of the living library, and that our DNA is encoded, and there is a key to the library, which we humans have hidden in our genes. This key is something many extraterrestrials want to get access to, because that would make them in charge of the library. So far, the key has remained hidden. Morning Sky mentions this as well in his Eridu papers, I discovered. He says that the female fire is the missing key to the Terra papers, and that he had been pondering for a long time why the Queen of the Stars, the Orion Queen, wanted so desperately to acquire what was hidden within human beings. He asks the question, what had Lord Enki embedded in us? This is a good question, however, I think the answer may not lie with Lord Enki, but this code may have been put in our DNA before Enki even came into the picture. I believe it was put there by the original life designers. Morning Sky's conclusions are that we humans shall achieve the stars and the other world, not through technology, which is grounded in the 4% reality, but through our own fire, with which we can reach into the 96% other world. The rites of sacred ecstasy are about the fire, residing naturally in women and a fire that men want to possess. 14. The mainstream scientific community and their pseudoscience. We are going to stay with Robert Morning Sky and parts of his Eridu papers for a little bit longer, because he has a very sobering view on how the science community tunes into this thing with dark matter/dark energy. Robert is telling us that the experts of our world, amongst whom he mentions astronomers, physicists, and scientists, say that our universe is made up of 21% dark matter. These experts, however, can't tell us what dark matter is, all they know is that it is invisible, it is present, and they have no clue how it affects our real world. Then, Robert continues, we have the Einsteinian partner to dark matter, which is dark energy. The best experts in the world are telling us that dark energy makes up 75% of the universe. These experts can't tell us what dark energy is, either. So here we are with 75% dark energy plus 21% dark matter equals 96% of the universe that no one can explain or has a clue to what it is or what it does. Left is 4% of the universe which the experts can address, but even this tiny 4% can only be explained to a small degree. This ultimately leaves us with a tiny little fraction of the entire universe that the experts can actually explain, or can they even do that? I'm not trying to be cynical, but just as a matter of fact. The truth is that an average man has 16,731 billion particles of dark matter passing through his body every second of every single day. Now, there is 3 times as much dark energy as there is dark matter, hence, an average man has nearly 17 billion particles of dark matter penetrating his body every second of the day and 51 billion particles of dark energy, while women have 15 billion particles of dark matter and 45 billion particles of dark energy penetrating her body every second of the day. These calculations are based on the average height and body mass of males and females. Then the fact remains, we humans are constantly being penetrated by particles we can't even begin to understand how they affect us. And ultimately, the so-called experts in our science community, whom are very authoritarian and firm about their status when comes to knowledge about how the universe works, can't explain 96% of the universe. Still they think they know how things work, what is real and what is not. And that is exactly my point, and has always been, as well as morning skies. And I quote, "Pray tell, how can experts who cannot definitively explain even 4% of the universe, and who freely admit that they cannot explain 96% of the universe, confidently and without doubt say that mysterious entities and mysterious powers cannot exist?" This is not just amazingly narrow-minded and ludicrous, but also arrogant to the extreme. If we think about it, we humans in our reality are, and must be, in minority. The real world must then in fact be the remaining 96% and we are the oddballs in the larger scheme of things. But of course, according to the science community, magic, shamanism, and the other world cannot exist. In fact, if this chapter was the only thing you ever read in your life and took it to heart, you will, per definition, have a much broader perspective of the universe and reality than anyone within the mainstream science community, in my humble opinion. As Morning Sky so accurately points out, the same experts say that the natives live in a world of myth and fantasy, and that they live in the world of truth and reality. But who lives in a fantasy world, and who does not? In fact, the natives were doing just fine before the white man came. Unfortunately, we have listened too long to our experts, who have done nothing but mis- and disinformed us, and most people in the civilized world have swallowed their lies and arrogance with hook and sinker. The consequences of this is that we have further and further disconnected from the real world and embraced the fantasy world of science and their educated, red brainwashed and manipulated, authorities. Only a few hundred years ago or less, people could still to a certain degree connect with the spirit world and entities and beings of other dimensions and densities. Even my own mother, who was brought up in the northern parts of Sweden in the 1920s and 1930s, when they were still farmers and lived close to the vast forests in that part of the world, has told me stories about how people saw things that they couldn't explain, like gnomes, fairies, and other for us strange creatures they called mitras. Still, this was quite normal and people didn't mind talking about it and comparing notes when they visited each other. We could go on comparing how scientists work with their so-called evidence, and how a spiritual person works, but I think the reader gets the point. Like I said, it's quite sobering and mind-boggling how we in the Western societies have been lied to and steered away from our multidimensional selves to narrow our band of perception to such a degree that we don't even think that anything outside our 5 senses is real. Now we have to rewire our brains by first disagreeing with the same authorities who have taught us what is real and not, and then once again connect with nature and what is way and beyond this planet that we live on to be able to get some real learning done. And who is behind the science community? That's right. The same controlling forces that have been around for almost 500,000 years, perhaps more, and whose front men and front women are the global elite, by some called the Illuminati. And you can also quite clearly see how they are manipulating us to keep us within the frequency band they want us trapped, so that we are more easily controlled. With the obvious examples brought up in this chapter, you the readers, can easily expand your consciousness to include religion, politics, the monetary system, and education in this whole conspiracy against humankind. So now, when we've come full circle on this, we can go on and talk some more about these multidimensional forces who most people don't know exist, who belong to the world we cannot see, and are therefore, by definition, invisible, unless they decide to show themselves, which they can and do, on occasion, or we expand our consciousness so we can see them. We are going to go back in time way before Homo sapiens were created, and then tell the story about the creation of we humans from a perspective that I've found much more accurate and explanatory than that of Sitchin's. Although, I would say that the two stories, the one about the Anunnaki, told by Sitchin, and the one I am about to tell, are complementary of each other and one does not necessarily exclude the other. This will be clearer as we move on and the reason why I wrote the first level of learning. With that said, let us go back to Genesis. How, and by which forces in addition to the Mother Goddess, was the universe created? Follow me on the fantastic journey through time, which starts from the beginning and ends in the near future, a journey spanning over billions and billions of years.